Well, if we go purely by segment classification, this is not a comparison we would normally do because the three cars here are quite different. But it's a comparison that everyone's looking at because it's hot at the moment. These two cars are freshly launched and they're going up against a long-time favorite. We've got two compact SUVs, and when we're talking about SUVs, really the Duster is the one that can be more categorized as an SUV with its 4x4. The S-Cross is a crossover, and of course the Creta sits somewhere in between these two. Well, three cars, one choice to make. Which one should it be? Though all of them are about 4.3 meters long, 1.8 meters wide, they don't look similar at all. Visibly, they're entirely different. The S-Cross sits lower to the ground, almost car-like in its stance, in fact, like an overgrown hatch, which makes it more crossover than SUV. The drooping nose and soft contours make it a lot like its siblings, and though Maruti have thrown in scuff plates and some cladding, the S-Cross just doesn't have the road presence of the other two. The Duster, on the other hand, makes a large statement with its wide haunches, large wheel arches, chunky seat pillars, and a squarish upright stance. It is the one that looks the most SUV in this battle. The blackened headlights and the blister effect near the tail and the smoke grey alloys on this all-wheel drive version add to the appeal. The Creta sits in between these two in terms of style. Less butch than the Duster, but definitely stronger than the S-Cross. It's a sophisticated design, and with its upright stance, it does stake claim to SUV territory, but in a softer manner than the Duster. The high bonnet line and the thick seat pillar give it the required attitude, and the otherwise flowing lines give it a maturity. The detailed front bumper and blackened A-pillar that gives the windscreen a wraparound feel are nice touches. While we were on the outside, we decided to check out the boot space as well. With all seats up, the Duster offers the most luggage space. All cars do offer the option to fold the rear seat backs to make more space, although only the ones in the S-Cross split 60-40. The S-Cross has the lowest loading lip too. It's a slight step up into the Creta, but it's really not difficult to get into at all. And once you're inside, you realize that this cabin is really nicely laid out. There's a nice two-tone coloring to the dash. It all flows outwardly to the door handles, which are pretty interesting and nice on the side. All the bells and whistles are really there. You have the touchscreen info display, you have climate control, you have steering mounted controls. So everything that you want is on hand, and I have to say that these front seats are the most comfortable of the lot. It's a user-friendly cabin with all controls falling to hand easily and the central screen positioned nice and high in line of sight. Although there are some bits that we think could be better, overall it still is the best quality interior. Well, getting in to the S-Cross is easier, it's just car-like, but then once you're inside you realize you're sitting much lower than the other two. Interiors, they're quite impressive for a Maruti. You know, it's got this very European look and build to it. There's this all-black cabin, textures are quite nice, except for some of the bits that have been borrowed from the other cars, like the Swift, which land up looking out of place here. The blue rim dials and the 4 aluminium, however, add to the richness of the interior. And though it's simple, the dash still looks modern, largely thanks to the high-res touchscreen. The S-Cross also comes feature-packed, but more on that later. The Duster, which was taking claim to the parade on the outside, loses out on interiors, coming across as very basic in this comparison. Despite the new 3-spoke steering, soft touch plastic on portions of the dash, and a few silver flourishes on the central console and handles, it still feels levels lower than the other two. Especially when you take into consideration it's priced pretty much on par. The lift-type door handles and manual aircon knobs look outdated, and the low position of the touchscreen speaks of the dash being originally designed without keeping it in mind. There are other critical ergonomic issues too. You have to hunt for the outside rear view adjust knob that sits hiding under the handbrake, and the secondary audio controls are positioned not on the wheel but on a stalk behind it, and so are out of view. Feature-wise, here's how they fare. For this comparison, we use the top spec versions of the S-Cross, Creta and Duster all-wheel drive. Each of these cars comes with aux-in and USB ports with Bluetooth for music streaming and telephone functions. The Creta additionally features 1 GB onboard music storage. All of them here get touchscreens with navigation as well. The S-Cross systems further feature voice commands for some of the functions, but they work with varying levels of success. All the touchscreens are nice enough, but the Creta and Duster display picks up glare affecting readability. It's the S-Cross's screen that has the best contrast and most resistance to reflections. Of the other features, you'll find automatic climate control systems in the S-Cross and Creta, while the Duster chugs along with rudimentary feeling manual knobs for the aircon. Talking ventilation, rear aircon vents are part of the Creta kit, but aren't available on the S-Cross and Duster all-wheel drive. Also worth noting is the fact that the Duster offers leather seats as an option, where all the others get it as standard. What is good is that all these cars get reverse parking sensors, though the S-Cross and Creta additionally come with auto-dimming mirrors and reverse cameras. The well-loaded S-Cross is also the only car with rain-sensing wipers and automatic headlights. Now when you're sitting in the S-Cross compared to the other two, you'll feel like you're driving a hatchback. It really feels that small and low to the ground. It feels very car-like. That's just it. Similar to their different styling, these three cars each have their own character out on the road too. The Duster offers up the feeling of driving a car that can tackle any terrain, whilst the Creta feels more like a sophisticated soft roader. Under the hood, they all come with 4-cylinder diesels that use common rail technology and variable geometry turbos. The S-Cross has the Fiat-sourced 1.6 diesel, whereas the Duster has the K9K 1.5 litre, and the Creta the familiar 1.6 from the Verna and Elantra. Let's begin with the S-Cross's engine, which makes a healthy 118 bhp, but the figure to note is the 32.6 kgm of torque, which gives it punch. Add to that the fact that it weighs in the lightest at 1275 kg and expectations run high. But the tall gearing lets it down a bit at the bottom end when out on the road. Now there's a lag to this engine which will make you work the gears in city traffic. Under 1800 RPM, it really makes you work the gears, and considering most of us use these cars predominantly in city environs, it's a negative for the S-Cross in this comparison. However, it does redeem itself on open stretches of road and sets the fastest 80 to 100 in 5th. It cruises in a very relaxed manner, with the motor keeping the revs low. With the strong mid-range, overtake maneuvers are easy as well. Whilst this motor may feel relaxed at cruising speeds, it's really the Creta's engine that impresses and feels the most quiet. You only hear it beyond the 2500 RPM mark, but fact is the way that it's geared, you really won't be pushing it beyond that quite often, so it comes out feeling the most refined of the lot. It's not the fastest in gear figures for this car, but it's still very drivable in the city. You don't have to work the gears too much. However, there's a considerable step up of power after 1800 RPM, and the mid-range is nice and punchy, which makes overtaking easy whether you're in city traffic or out on a highway. It performs in such a well-behaved manner that it masks its speed. The Creta is actually the quickest to the 100 mark. But the good part is that the torque spread is so nice that even below the 1800 RPM mark, the Creta doesn't have any kind of pronounced lag. It's got enough power to allow you to trundle around comfortably. But the one that really does well in city conditions and in traffic is the Duster. And it's funny because, the short gearing is really meant for the off-roading capabilities, but it makes it very, very drivable in the city. You don't have to work the gears too much. You can amble around in a higher gear, slow down, and then put your foot down and just get a move on quite easily again. It may be the slowest in the 0 to 100 race. Its in-gear timings outdo the others by a large margin. The third gear tops off at 80, which is what the others do in second. And it's because of this short gearing that the Duster always feels alert and ready to get going at lower speeds. But that ability means it does lose out steam at the top end. And though you can cruise at an even pace, you always find yourself looking for yet another gear.
The motor spins at a high 2400 RPM at 100 km an hour, even in 6. But talking about drivability, it's just as well that it is good because the clutch is too heavy to be put to constant use. And in this comparison, the gearbox feels the roughest to use, coming across as rubbery. Now, where the Duster loses out in refinement, it makes up in dynamics.
Be it out on an open stretch of road at cruising speeds, or even when you're tackling the corners, it's the Duster that really feels the most stable and planted, and it's the one that you'd want to take up a winding section of road.
There is still some kickback off the steering from bad patches of road, and you will have to hold on to the steering, especially if you catch a bump around a corner. Still, we have to say it is an improvement over previous versions. The Duster's heavier steering that feels secure at speeds lets you feel its weight in slower conditions, especially when compared. The Creta is quite a contrast.
The steering is nice and light and easy when you want to maneuver the Creta through city traffic or put it into tight parking spots. But even out on an open stretch of road like this, it weighs up quite well, and in fact it's one of the nicest Hyundai steerings that I've experienced so far. It's not enthusiastic, it's not exciting, but it does the job.
The Creta, unlike other Hyundais, never feels out of its comfort zone whether you're at higher speeds in a straight line or around corners. It holds its ground well. The S-Cross in that sense is good dynamically too, and being the lowest of these means it feels like a sporty hatchback. Unfortunately, its JK tires just don't complement its handling capabilities, squealing in protest at most times, and they make you back off even when you don't have to. Even the steering doesn't inspire too much confidence, feeling vague off dead center and not coming back to center as quick as you'd like around corners. Now, though these may slot themselves into the compact SUV segment, they offer up quite a lot in terms of backseat too.
The Creta's backseat is really the most spacious. There's loads and loads of legroom here. The seat bench is also nice and wide. But the only part is that the middle of the seat is contoured, so it may not be the most comfortable place for the third person to sit, although there is enough legroom for him because the console really doesn't intrude too much into the rear. The only thing I don't like about this space is the fact that you sit quite low and the window line is high, so it can tend to make you feel a little hemmed in.
The S-Cross offers up good amounts of space as well.
Well, there's a good amount of legroom in the S-Cross, so it's a comfortable place to be. But what's really nice about it is the theatre-style seating effect that you get because you feel like you look over the front seat and out, and there's really good visibility up front.
But it's the Duster that scores on seat comfort and visibility with the large glass areas on the rear windows. The only irritating part is an ergonomic issue again. The window switches are positioned where you'd normally put your elbow on the armrest, so you keep rolling the windows up or down inadvertently. As far as ride quality goes, it's a mixed bag.
The Creta's backseat is actually a great place to be, not only because of the space, but because the low-speed ride is also the best of the bunch. It just blunts the edges of the potholes and bumps when you're trundling through city traffic. However, if you pick up the pace and you go a little bit faster, it does tend to get choppier. The Duster may not be as supple as the Creta is at low speeds, but the fact that, overall it's a more planted, more stable ride makes it very good for long distance journeys. When you're going over bad sections of road at quicker paces, it's really the Duster that feels more settled.
Compared to the other two, the S-Cross has a firmness to its low-speed ride, but it's not jarring. And its lower stance and controlled body movement make it feel flat and composed at higher speeds. Let's also take a look at the prices and the fuel economy figures. With the variants that we are comparing, there is very little to give or take on pricing.
So the S-Cross has a lot going for it. It's a comfortable car, it's practical, it's got a fun to drive character, especially out on the highway, and it comes with a lot of features. But its bland crossover looks and the fact that it isn't really drivable in the city, it makes you work at it, let it down. Of course, there's the fact that Maruti have priced this 1.6 litre diesel version 3 lakh more than the 1.3 litre diesel. And that makes it a little difficult to digest, especially in the face of this competition. Had it been priced better, it might have stood its ground better over here. Now, what really stands its ground is the Renault Duster. It's got the attitude, it's got the image, it rides nicely, it's extremely drivable in the city, and of course, if you want to do off-roading, it's the only 4x4 over here. Well, it's got a lot going for it, and if you ask us, should you pay 1.2 lakh more for the 4x4 version, we'll definitely say a big yes, because it's worth it. Now, had the competition been only between the S-Cross and the Renault Duster would have walked away with the honours over here. But when you put the Creta into the mix, it changes the whole bag. Well, for most of us who are looking at a compact SUV, it's not only to go on that adventurous trail on the weekend and go off-roading. We want something that makes us feel comfortable and better in the city as well. And the Creta does that in huge measures because its interiors definitely feel the most premium of the lot. It's the one that you feel the best on the inside. It comes feature loaded, it's comfortable, it's spacious, and it may not have the drivability of the Duster in the city, or it may not have the aplomb that the Duster has over bad sections of road, but it's definitely not far behind either. So it makes for a very well-rounded package. It comes at a great value, and we find that the Creta has more strengths than weaknesses, which is why it's our winner.